Welcome to today's episode of The Growth Zone. I am Christian Bartsch. What is the core benefit of listening to this show? Business leaders in corporate and privately held companies gain insights into trends and strategies that provide them with a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Each episode focuses on an area such as marketing, sales, innovation, or funding that is absolutely critical to the growth of companies, whether they are startups or corporate global players, where management needs to juggle the challenges of market entry or knowing how to navigate the uncertainties of disruptive developments. Mind feeding is where clarity evolves and helps solving organizational challenges. For those who listen to the entire episode, I have a special surprise gift. I am working on some great guests that are industry leaders in management, innovation, and marketing. Let's get started on today's episode. So today I am with Paul Ace from the UK, and we are going to be discussing how to amplify your webinar through conversational commerce. Sounds really an interesting topic. And before we actually go deep in, Paul, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
So great, firstly, to be on the show, Christian. I'm really excited to be here. And really about myself, I started off working in a bakery and then went from a bakery to being a wedding singer for a living. And that turned into selling bridesmaids dresses online. And then somehow ended up where we are today, which is we help clients with webinars, really amplify their webinar through conversational commerce. And some people might be wondering, what is conversational commerce? I've never heard of it before. We prefer to call it CCOM. Just because, we know people like slang terms for things. So imagine if you could personally greet every lead as you guide them through the process. And we're looking at creating this 80% human-like experience and a 20% human experience that guides people on the customer journey, holds a hand, and then guides them towards the sale through your webinar.
Wow, that sounds really awesome. Is it something like avatars, or what do I have to imagine?
Yeah, so there's quite a few phases that we go through. So we look at every part of the customer journey. The first thing that's really important is looking at really painting that picture of what's going on in your business right now. So a lot of the times when we first speak to a business, we'll come in and we'll say, okay, cool. So what message is going out at that point? And they're not sure what's going out where. So we actually paint that whole picture of the business and map everything out to see, firstly, if that messaging is congruent. And secondly, are you bringing people closer to you or further away? Are you building that know, like, and trust factor? Or are you pushing them away, or, just giving them the good old fashioned reminder emails, before a webinar, which when people are getting those kind of things in their inbox every day, you need to be able to stand out. So one of the things that we look at is, okay, how can we pre-frame someone before the webinar? So by the time they get to that, they're already on side and they've already got that know, like, and trust factor, where it feels more like a natural decision to go to the next step rather than trying to force the sale and force it over the line. And then we take that customer journey all the way through to the end, including post-webinar and also after the sale. Then how do we guide them to the next step of the customer journey through using that conversational commerce experience?
So it doesn't matter as well which kind of webinar platform the client uses.
No, the technology doesn't really matter. We've got clients on GoToWebinar, we've got them on Webinar Jam, EverWebinar. Some clients use Stealth Webinar, Zoom. There's loads of different things like that. It's more about the pieces of the puzzle that you're fitting in there, right? It's about layering on top of and amplifying what's already working.
So actually using your smart opportunities in a better way, having data, knowing what's happening, and then reacting properly instead of being static, maybe.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things on that is, taking more of a conversational approach. And something to remember is every single person that comes through your funnel is a human beating heart, and a lot of people forget that, and they just start to see them as numbers, right? So what we look at is like, how can we almost create this back and forth conversation? How can we create that conversation in the emails that are written, in SMS follow-ups, in things, adding in things like voicemail drops when people have registered for a webinar, or in the follow-up? So you're getting this multi-channel approach where what we like to do, like for example in the emails, we'll go, you might be thinking this, that makes sense, right? So they're getting all those little micro cues and micro commitments as we're going through the copy. So by the end of it, they're already nodding their head and getting the buy-in, and naturally saying, yes, I want this. I want the next thing that you're offering.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Definitely. Sounds really, really great. So you mentioned as well before that you have a great big client base in United States. So I suppose people in US are very using a lot of webinars for selling products and services. What's the typical kind of product or service that somebody will be using this kind of webinar system and scaling it out with that conversational commerce?
Yeah, so you see a lot of people have different kinds of online courses, and it doesn't really matter too much what the online course is. It's more about people buy from people, which and sometimes that gets lost in this, in the modern world. I know I spoke to a guy called Ted Rubin a while back, in something that he phrases is ROR, return on relationships. And we look at how we can create a combination of that through that human-like experience and a human experience. So if you look at the different kind of online courses, we've got clients that are running financial education, teaching people how to sell beats online, teaching other things like how to start your own online business. So there's lots of different things that it can work for, and it's also about like looking at each touch point that's going on. So for example, let's say you're doing a direct sale on the webinar. Now you might focus a lot on the pre-frame before the webinar, so you might focus a lot on warming those people up, getting those people excited about the webinar and what they're about to learn, building that connection with the audience through testimonials and case studies, and building a story and an emotional connection. And then when you get on the webinar, then people are more likely to buy. Now you've got the other side of things where people are selling to a book call, and if you're selling to actually saying at the end of the webinar, hey, come and jump on a call, and then we'll look at selling you this higher ticket product, then if that's the case, then we still look at the same kind of process. However, we may focus a little bit more on the nurture before the pre-frame, rather than pre-framing the mind for buying quite as quickly, because the important thing as well is get that balance between pre-frame and nurture, and also making sure you get enough people to show up. So you've got to create a combination between giving value, creating curiosity, and also building connection and rapport. And putting all those things together, then that's how you end up getting more course sales out the back end.
That definitely sounds really the way to go. And for instance, how would it be, for instance, let's say if you're using a webinar, for instance, for a B2B business. Let's say you want to sell to medium-sized companies and you have to use webinars, especially now when we think that many salespeople can't just go hop in a car and drive somewhere to a big potential buyer. And well, everybody's home office and they won't necessarily want to have you at home. So you have to maybe sell it through a webinar or anything. Or even if it's, as you said, for instance, a Zoom call or whatever, that still needs some kind of preparation, because otherwise people might not attend.
Yeah, so as regarding that, there has been a big shift, obviously, especially in the last 12 months. I think it's sped up the online world by about 5 years, people have said, and maybe even more now, I'm not sure. That being said, when you look at where things are heading, I think that the online course industry is predicted to be worth $325 billion a year. So a lot of these people that were doing live events before are now taking these live events and turn them into online summits or, multi-step webinars. So you've one of the things that we say early on in the process, you've got to decide what your objective is. So some people will look at the objective and say, okay, I just want to generate leads. I want to generate brand awareness. And if you're a medium to large business, what you might be doing is just going, okay, we want to be at the forefront of people's minds. We want to give value and to our community that's already there and just educate them, right? So you've got educational webinars out there. And then also, you've got the more direct selling kind of webinars or the ones that have got a bridge to get people on a product demo or things like that. So there is a lot of different angles that you can go at, and there's no real right or wrong. It's what's important is you stay consistent with the angle that you're going to go at and do the testing and the tweaking to make that work. So we've got some clients, like I say, that sell directly on a webinar. We've got other clients that actually run like a 4 or 5 day challenge and then do a webinar on the last day of the challenge. And then they convert a really high amount of people onto a higher ticket program because they've built so much like, know, and trust factor over that period of time. So our job as we come into those kind of businesses is to help the client to create as much engagement as possible in those first 5 days, because we know if we get more eyeballs seeing that content and engaging with that content in the first 5 days, the higher the close rate is going to be on the post webinar, and also then making sure that everyone post webinar who's booked a call actually shows up for that call as well, which again comes down to them pre-framing the call. So you're always looking at pre-framing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing to guide people on that customer journey.
Yeah, so even if it's, let's say it's a medium-sized company and they're selling, let's say pumps for factories, let's say, or some kind of factory equipment or so, then it's a typical thing, of course, where the salesperson can't go now to visit the client, and he has to, I suppose, preface what are the new products, what are the new things, why is it worth investing? Because, of course, especially now, finance departments will try to keep the money together, everything that's available to all, and not spend the money. And, of course, on the other hand, the engineers or the factory engineers need to, of course, somehow have argumentation to go and say, we need to have this new system. We need to be ahead of time, because once the economy revives again in all different countries, if others have it, we will be too expensive. We won't have the quality, the fast, and other things. And that's, I think, maybe somewhere where webinars could be even helping as well, the sales team as well, to actually sell the products. And it's an interesting thing, because when you think of it, most of these companies in these areas, they do a lot of export as well. So it's not just a local economy, whether it's somebody who's selling industrial products in the UK, or they're selling it to customers in, let's say, in Washington or in Florida, California, wherever, it doesn't matter. They'll have all sorts of challenges now because they just can't cross the city and the state. Mm.
Yeah, and I think on that note, there's a different positioning that goes on through a webinar than goes on, in a face-to-face sale. So in a face-to-face sale, you've got this back and forth where you can judge. Firstly, you can judge the body language of the person that you're speaking to. So 38% of nonverbal communication, 38% communication is tonality. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you're presenting on a webinar, you're not getting that feedback from the other person. However, something that a lot of people don't focus on the webinar is the tonality of how you're presenting that webinar. So are you adding in pauses through the process? Are you guiding people on this excitable journey and then dropping and slowing your speech down? How are you guiding people on that process? So I came from a background being a wedding singer. Mm-hmm. And being a wedding singer, you had pretty much like about 10 seconds to capture an audience. If you don't capture the audience in that 10 seconds, then that's it. It's game over. You're going to be singing to a bookshelf all night, which is, I'll be honest, it's more fun if you're not singing to a bookshelf all night. So I had to learn very quickly how to use tones and inflections and pace to guide people into this state, to get them to, move the body, get on the dance floor, get moving. And one of the ways to do that I used to use, and sometimes on the webinar, this is can be beneficial as well, is actually repeating that phrase. And you might have seen it in game shows and things like that, where they used to go things like, "Oh, but we don't want to give you that." Right. So you might start off and it was like, is everyone ready to have a good time tonight? And people are like, yeah. And you're like, I said, is everyone ready to have a good time? And then everyone's like, yeah. Right. Because people naturally want to match the energy level that is going on. So then you can apply that same thing to your webinar. So even if you're selling in industrial plumbing or machinery, or whether you're selling an online course or whatever it is, having something that's also entertaining whilst being educational and transformational, that's really the triad that you're looking for to have it. Yes, it's educational, people feel like they're getting value. Yes, it's transformational, so it means people are taking their perception from what they think right now to where you want to guide them to on that customer journey. And then thirdly, focusing on making it entertaining as well. And entertainment doesn't have to be, like slapstick comedy or like really in your face. However, you can still create an engaging presentation with, even in something that's quite a dry subject. And it's about looking at how tying those three things together can make webinars convert higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that really gets you as well into your mind. Like a similar example, once when I used to go to the open mic evening in Angel Islington in the Borders bookshop, there used to be always once in the month, there was this meetups, and there were singers, poetry people and so on. And you could sit down and listen to them. And there was this one guy who was, his nickname was Poetry Man. He rattled down his poetry as if it was a machine gun. At first he said, "Oh, you can't cope." And then it was so fantastic how fast he went through it. It was astonishing. And then a different kind of talent. Because then you can't actually react other than just listen to it, because your brain is just overwhelmed by the massiveness of the whole thing, how it fits with it, and so on. And the same thing is as well when you look at webinars and that. If the whole thing goes into your mind and your brain says, "Wow, that's actually what we need," and wait a minute, there's so much value, and we're getting here, and we find out this stuff I didn't know before, and nobody told me. Why didn't they tell me? But this guy knows this stuff, and so on. Well, with that, we can sell even more and more stuff. Then actually people, I think, are going to definitely buy in if the value, and it doesn't matter whether it's being fast or slow. Maybe it's more fitting to the audience and what they really want.
I'd say it's a combination of the two as well. That's what's really important. Is so too much of anything, right? Like what, Christian? What's your favorite cake in the world?
Battenberg cake.
Battenberg cake. I actually used to live on Battenberg Road. It wasn't as magical as place as you'd expect. We had 10 police raids in 12 months next door, which was yeah. So anyway, that's a story for another day. But let's say your favorite cake is Battenberg cake. Now I'm going to give you Battenberg cake today, tomorrow, the day after that. First week, I bet you're pretty excited, right? You're like, "Oh, I got Battenberg cake 7 days in a row." Now I want you to like fast forward in your mind 12 months. Now you've had Battenberg cake for 365 days in a row. Is it still your favourite cake?
No longer, but at least with the Tetley's tea, it's the same thing. We've got bags of Tetley's tea. Well, every day Tetley's. That's no problem. But definitely Battenberg cake every day. That would be too much.
now, fast forward again in your mind 30 years. Right? Imagine you've had Battenberg cake every day for 30 years. Is it still your favourite cake, or are you just like, "Oh my God, I've got to eat this cake again"?
No, but I'm sure I would explode.
Right. So then when you think about your webinar and people, someone may be listening to this going, "Well, why the hell is he talking about Battenberg cake?" So when you think about that, right, on a webinar, yes, you may be fast. You may be a fast speaker and talk really quickly and want to get through it all really, 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 really quickly. Or you may be this other kind of person that just talks slowly and everything is, you'll get to the point, at the end. And neither of them become entertaining. Why? Because your brain becomes immune to it. Because what is the brain always looking for? The brain is always looking for new things. And why is that? The reason for that is because if you go back to caveman times, the brain was always looking for threats. So the brain is naturally trained to find new things, which gives it a hit of dopamine. And that dopamine basically sets the alert bells off. So when you're looking at tonality and looking at the way that you're presenting your webinar and the words and the phrases that you're using as you're going through that, you've always got to be looking at creating pattern interrupts in there. So, for example, we work on the roller coaster experience, right? So you'll take someone on that journey where, Christian, we might be having that conversation quite, leisurely as we're talking through, and as we're talking through, we're getting that a little bit faster and just a little bit more excitable, and then we kind of reach up to this crescendo point right at the top, and then things just drop down. And when those sentences drop, that's what you're really listening to now. You're not listening to the stuff really that was right at the top. You're listening to the stuff that I've now just brought the conversation down, and I'm waiting. And when you start to pause more and more in that, then it gets really not even theatrical. It gets really poignant, right? Because you're like, well, what's he going to say next? I'm not sure. And then we can go through that process again, and you do that throughout the webinar, and it naturally takes people on this journey with you.
Yeah, definitely. And it keeps people awake, that they don't still start clicking off or just walk away and get their cup of tea or coffee and stand in front of the Nespresso machine, and you hear the instead of actually them listening to you.
Well, you haven't fell asleep yet, Christian, so I must have done something.
Yeah, I had an espresso before. Yeah, but I did that before we started our interview.
Yes, so that just gives you a better idea, when from a tonality perspective, that's how we work. And then also when you're looking at compelling copy, something that we really focus on is micro commitments. So micro commitments, and some people may be like, what are micro commitments? And you may have a good idea. And essentially what they are is very small, tiny commitments that you get people to take throughout the customer journey. So imagine you walk into a car dealership, right? So you walk into that car dealership, and first thing they do, it's like, hi, how can I help you today? What are you looking for today? Right? So they ask you what you're looking for, and then you say, I'm looking for this kind of car, right? So then they walk you through that process. They go, great, we've got this one, this one, this one, and this one. Which one of those is standing out to you the most? Do you like the feel of that one? Yeah, great. And this has got that on it as well. That's quite a cool feature, right? And they're like, yeah, that's great. So what you're doing is you're pre-selling and creating micro commitments all the way through. How many micro commitments do you think, on average, someone should be doing in a webinar, Christian? And like, if you got this right, I'll be honest, like I'll be very surprised.
Could be somewhere between 5 and 10.
150.
150.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then a lot of people might be listening to this right now and asking themselves the question and going, how am I going to do 150 micro commitments? Getting people to say yes, or getting people to buy in 150 times in 90 minutes. That's just a crazy thought, right?
Yeah.
And there's a micro commitment, right? And there's a crazy thought, right? And you're like, yeah, that is a crazy thought, right? So all the time, and I'm like, if I could show you a way to do 150 micro commitments within a 90-minute period, is that something you'd be interested in?
Definitely, I think so. People definitely would want to have it.
And if you could use that, in your webinar, it'd probably increase conversions, right? Right. So this is, you see, I've just done like 5 micro commitments. They're right there.
Wow.
Because we've just like walked back through that. You'd be interested in that, right? And you're like, yeah, I would. Great. And you'd probably agree, if that happened, it'd increase your sales, right? And you're like, yeah, it would. Yeah. Right? So constantly, and maybe on your side of the mic right now, you're nodding your head, Christian, just going, yes, this makes sense. This is it. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
And what happens over time is you do that more and more. You start to do it without thinking. It does my wife's head in, to be honest, because I have this thing of saying right quite a lot at the end of the sentence, so just with that little bit of curiosity tone. And when you start adding those in and tie that in with tonality, and then start using other embedded language patterns, things like, you may be thinking in your mind right now as we're talking together,
Hmm.
and then you start to create that picture in your mind. And
Hmm.
as you see that picture in your mind, and you see that picture getting bigger and bigger and going into full color, as you look at that, the sound gets louder and louder as you're seeing yourself on that webinar right now, closing more sales because you're using those micro commitments, because you're putting those tools into action. You've got the confidence. You feel your shoulders have come back. Your head is held high. You feel really excited. You see that picture's getting wider and wider and wider as you look into the mirror going, yes, I'm a confident closer,
Hmm.
right? All that kind of language patterns guiding people through the webinar like that. You probably agree, it's probably going to close more sales, right?
Yeah, definitely. It'll get people as well to stay longer,
Mm.
because you have to keep them as well to stay long enough until you actually can get them to understand, okay, what am I buying? What's going to cost? What am I getting? Why should I buy it? What's the benefit? Because people maybe think, oh, maybe I do it myself, maybe I do this, or maybe I buy something else, or I've already seen that other thing, or they just think, okay, I just need a webinar system, and I just do it, instead of actually going through the whole thing, what you actually need. As you mentioned before, we need as well, of course, the data. We have to know what the people are doing to keep them along instead of losing them halfway.
Exactly. We use the phrase, you can have the best party in the world, but if no one shows up, is it really the best party in the world? You're just going to sit in the corner eating sausage rolls and Battenberg cake on your own, and it's not quite as fun.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Otherwise, you need another webinar to at least make it the virtual pub or whatever,
Yeah.
so that you can have it. Exactly. And that's the thing, in today's time, of course, businesses are so busy trying to find new ways to sell the stuff, and they may be trying out different kind of platforms, but they don't really know the real how and the why is actually how to get this stuff really to be successful, and not just something where they spend money on social media and so on just to get people to sign up. Because I see sometimes these ads on Facebook and other platforms, I click on them and I see, oh, I'm supposed to wait 5 hours till I can see the webinar. And I know exactly, because of the platform that they're using, it's all recorded anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't have the patience anymore. Then they lose me already, because I say, oh, I'm the sort of red type. So I say, no, I want to have it now or not. And then I don't buy, and I don't come back again. I don't bother anymore, because then I was actually really keen on seeing the webinar. I would have listened to it to the end at that point. And I can imagine that's something where then your systems, your platforms, your philosophy then actually would notice, hey, we're losing a lot of people who actually not signing in. They've signed up, but they're not actually logging into the webinars because we forced them to wait 2 hours, 4 hours, or whatever. And sometimes people maybe have now the time to listen to it. So we have to get them now on the webinar, because now they have got the time and the patience as well to listen to us and, yeah, take up the opportunity that we're offering them on the webinar.
And there's there's a balance between the two, and these are things are always worth split testing depending on what the offer is, how complex the offer is, what buying state people need to be in, what the price point is. So if you're selling something that's 3,000-4,000 or plus, and you're going to put people on a book call, then we found with one client that they had better conversion rates in the end when they made people wait 24 hours and created this real live process where naturally, hey, the webinar is tomorrow at this time. We do it once a day at this time, and that was it. However, it was pre-recorded, but it felt a lot more live than this one where they say, oh, it's starting in 15 minutes or whatnot, and you're like, well, it's not really starting in 15 minutes, is it? So the other opportunity is going completely the opposite way, where, like you say, you just give them the option to watch it there and then. Now, the thing that's important there is then seeing where the drop off points are. So we were going through with a client a week or so ago, looking through their Vimeo account, because we did a more of a hosted video on the site, and then we go, okay, well, are people actually seeing the pitch? Because there's no point focusing on improving your pitch if no one's seeing it, and there's no point improving the content part if no one's getting past the introduction. So firstly, you've got to go, right, is there any, like, when you look at those graphs where you see customer drop off, you go, is there any points in there where you're really seeing people drop off right now? And then what could we do? So something we're testing out in the next few weeks is going to be helping a client build a short form webinar, right? Which is almost like a long form VSL, long form video sales. Like, it's going to be like 20 minutes. And instead of going down the traditional webinar route, we're looking at applying the complete opposite, where we take all the objections that a client has and shatter them in a anti-webinar, right? So instead of trying to, when you have a lot of marketers that almost like hide from these things, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to tell you that, I don't want to tell you that. We're just like, listen, I'm going to tell you the price up front. And we don't know how this is going to perform yet, by the way, so it'll be interesting listening about this podcast in a year. But like, to say, this is the price up front. Look, this is the great stuff that people have been saying. This is also the stuff that people say about us that maybe isn't so nice, right? Because people hide so much, or any bad press or anything like that. Sometimes if you just put that out there up front and say, this is why someone said that. So, if you've got, let's say someone's put a smear campaign out there against, because as you grow and as you scale, let's say you're doing $500,000 a month, there's going to be someone out there who's a hater, right? Because you don't get to $500,000 a month without having a few haters, because you need to be prolific one way or the other anyway. And what you find is there's a lot more of these people popping up who haven't even bought the course, haven't even like logged into anything, and then they'll go and put a negative review out there. So if you actually challenge that on the webinar and say, hey, this is what this person said, so let's just tackle that right now before we go any further, as opposed to trying to shy away from it and deceive people, just being like this totally honest and ethical process.
Yeah, because people will Google it anyway, and then they'll find and start thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't buy. There's obviously a hook in it. But that's how it is. And I think some of these haters that you mentioned, they're either competitors or people who are just unhappy because your ad. I had one, for instance, we had some ads running some time ago as well, and it was interesting. One person got annoyed because it was popping up at that time when he was surfing.
Yeah. I've had one of those as well.
And it's crazy to think with, they want to have Facebook for free, but actually Facebook, of course, has to refinance its business through advertising. Yeah, and it's not for free because people are actually paying with their data, with their content that they're generating. Otherwise, Facebook would close its doors tomorrow.
Exactly. I know there's a lot of changes going on from a cookie perspective and everything like that at the moment. But going back to really that conversational commerce experience, like when you remember every person that comes through the door is a human beating heart, then you can build that relationship with them before the webinar, on the webinar, and then post webinar. So you want people to feel good about buying, not scared to buy.
Yeah.
So type and at the same time, if you don't talk about people's pains on the webinar and you only talk about their desires, say pain is twice as powerful as pleasure. So you've got to put that out there, because if someone wants a transformation in their life, sometimes it takes an element of pain to create the pleasure and the transformation they want. That's why we focus on transformation over education.
Yeah, and people just need to have the objections handled before in time, so that they don't start popping out later on once they're wanting to press a button or wanting to fill out the form with the credit card details and so on. We just need to have it handled before, and then the stuff is ticked off and it's no longer an issue. And actually the payment action is then much faster because there's no objection more in their mind.
Yeah, 100%. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So, Paul, it was great having you here on the show. If people want to connect with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can head over to amplifycom.com. That's amplifycom, no hyphens or anything, .com. And there's some free resources on there, and also some more ways to get in touch with us. And we'd love to help and support you with your webinar and building a conversational CCOM system into your business.
Yeah, that's great. So wonderful. And then we'll see how we'll be. I think in the future, be doing surely another conversation here on the show on other similar topics around webinars.
Fantastic.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Growth Zone with Christian Bartsch. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review or rating here on iTunes or on podchaser.com. If you found the content helpful, then share it on social media. I would like to invite you to follow our show so that you don't miss the upcoming interviews with leaders in the market. Simply visit the website follow.prmediareach.com. I will be adding the link also to the description of this episode so that you just need to click on that link. For those of you who are listening and signing up to follow the show, I have reserved a free copy of the ultimate guide on content marketing. This is the strategy that got me top corporate clients like McDonald's, Linde, Hewlett-Packard, Deutsche Bank, Volvo, and many others. That strategy has been working for over 10 years. It also got me contracts with police, transport authorities, military, and several universities, and even leading research institutes. For sure, it also worked wonders as it got me many small, medium-sized entrepreneurs and enterprises as clients. And that even included international clients from all around the world. The link to sign up for our free broadcasting service and the guide is follow.prmediareach.com. That will give you access to the most recent version of my ultimate guide on content marketing. You can follow me as well on Twitter by using the Twitter handle CAP_Bartsch. That's spelled Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel. Yes, that is CAP_Bartsch. Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel.